The year is 1907. Livestock dealer William Alexander Silverwood, also known as Billy, purchased some land and constructed a beautiful home 3 kilometers north of the city limits. It was at this location where he built his reputation selling livestock. Billy sold cattle and magnificent teams of horses that earned him a modest income. One team of 4 horses could fetch him around $1,400. At the time, Saskatoon had been suffering from an outbreak of typhoid fever, caused mainly by spring runoff washing manure from the city streets into residents' drinking supplies. In 1908, the city would suffer its worst year in history, with 206 cases. Since Billy lived outside the city, he was unaffected by the epidemic. He had been getting his water from a freshwater spring found on his property. With this, he and his nephew Clarence had the perfect solution to the city dwellers' problems. A solution that was sort of an early 1900s version of a side hustle. Rise and grind, am I right? They built a pump house next to the spring, and the following year began selling Silverwood Springs water to the people of Saskatoon. Their business idea was an immediate success, as Saskatoon was still years away from getting its own water treatment facility. Postcards were made for residents to request the delivery of beverages directly to their home. These deliveries would be made via a team of horses fitted with a specially crafted horse trailer decorated in colorful advertisements. By 1911, the city had nearly doubled in population, and Billy's business ventures were extremely profitable. With this success, he decided to expand his livestock business. Mr. Silverwood's plan was to build a large barn capable of housing approximately 400 livestock. The only problem was that he built this brand new barn upstream from his highly regarded freshwater spring. This man had over 400 acres of land and built his barn directly upstream from his spring. Naturally, runoff from the barn contaminated the water, leading to several cases of typhoid that were linked to Silverwood Springs. To make matters worse, Saskatoon had finally installed a water treatment facility. This meant that Billy would no longer have the large volume of customers that he once had. However, Billy had another stroke of luck. In November of 1912, the boom in population and initial success of Silverwood Springs caught the interest of Chicagoland developer Robert E. Glass. Glass had been scouring the West to find the perfect location for a sophisticated brewery. He had heard that the best water in the area came from a little bottling company by the name of Silverwood Springs. Initially, all he wanted to do was purchase the bottling plant from Billy and build a 6-story tall brewery with a proposed investment of $500,000. However, Mr. Silverwood would not let him have it without some stipulations. Billy negotiated a deal for Robert to purchase 473 acres of land. Robert then subdivided the land into residential plots and began selling them for the outrageous price of $500. It doesn't sound like much right now, but for comparison, nearby lots in a similar area were selling for a mere $75. This is where the short-lived idea of Factoria began. With the nearby natural resources in the area being abundant, this new land purchase was looking rather profitable for Mr. Glass. Various manufacturers and a flour mill all began planning for production in Factoria. The construction of a 3-story, 66-room hotel and some residential homes was also underway to attract potential buyers and investors. To attract the public, Mr. Glass launched a very expensive and aggressive advertising campaign. He advertised for Factoria as if it were a snake oil, dubbing it the Magic City, in his own words of course, taking up full pages to promote the sale of lots with the promise of big things to come. Robert claimed that $3 million would be spent on the development of Factoria, $1 million of that being spent on his state-of-the-art brewery, a bottle glass works, and multiple brick plants. An additional $2 million was proposed to be spent on the Canadian Northern Railway shops. On December 12, 1912, the Real Estate Board had seen enough from Mr. Glass. The Saskatoon Phoenix published an editorial regarding their investigation into Factoria. They expressed a great deal of skepticism in Robert's proposal. One member of the board stated that they had talked with Mr. Glass and had nothing against him or his propositions, provided they were genuine. They then stated in the article that they would ask Mr. Glass 3 questions. If he could answer them in a straightforward manner, that it would not be necessary to use so much paper in advertising what he wanted to sell. Clearly, the Real Estate Board was not impressed with Mr. Glass's advertising tactics. The Real Estate Board unanimously agreed not to endorse the project. The Daily Star released an article 2 days later with a statement from Robert E. Glass himself. False rumors to the effect that Factoria is nothing more than a land-selling scheme appear to have been freely circulated by members of Saskatoon's Real Estate Trust, who fear that the sale of subdivisions which they own may be injured by Factoria and its large industries. Or, in simpler terms, you guys are just jealous. Yeah, more like deeply annoyed, Mr. Glass. However, in a random turn of events, an article titled "Factoria Now in the Hands of Mr. Silverwood" was released on June 3, 1913, stating that Mr. Glass had a sudden change of heart and was no longer interested in the Factoria proposition. The real reason why he left was unknown. It was a swift decline for Factoria following the departure of Mr. Glass. The businesses under construction were seen through to completion, and only a few of them were functional before the declaration of the First World War on July 28, 1914. This was the final blow for Factoria. The economic downturn meant that investors were no longer interested in the idea of a costly industrial zone. The implement manufacturing plant was the only business that survived throughout the war. However, it wasn't for long, as it was liquidated in 1923. The buildings were eventually destroyed by fire 10 years later. Despite being finished, the flour mill sat unused throughout most of the war. It initially started as Northland Milling and was eventually acquired by Interprovincial Flour Mills in 1918. In 1927, it was acquired by Robin Hood Flour and spent several years in and out of commission until it was demolished in 1939. Billy Silverwood's barn remained on the site until the 50s, when it was lost to a lightning strike and subsequent fire. By the late 1960s, all remaining buildings, including Mr. Silverwood's original home, were demolished to make room for the construction of a new neighborhood. This neighborhood would be called Silverwood Heights, and today the area where Billy's home once stood is now a park, courtesy of Meewasin Valley Authority. At the very end of Edelman Drive, you will find the steps that once led to the back door of Billy's home. If you head off the paved path towards the river, you might find a few colorful pieces of glass. However, you can most definitely still find the spring that started it all, happily trickling into the South Saskatchewan River over a century later.